Somewhere in your grandmother's kitchen, pushed behind the marmalade and forgotten by everyone except her, sat a tin that outlived 2 prime ministers, a royal wedding, and the dog. She never threw it away because she knew something the supermarkets would rather you forget. Certain foods, stored properly, last not months but years, sometimes decades. Number 18 on this list was found perfectly edible after 40 years in a Welsh farmhouse cupboard, and number 7 was carried by British soldiers through 2 world wars because nothing else survived the journey. These 25 pantry secrets kept Britain fed through shortages, strikes, and winters that froze the milk on the doorstep. Before we begin, subscribe, because this list might change how you shop forever. Number 25. Bicarbonate of soda. That yellow and white box of bicarbonate of soda sitting at the back of every British pantry is essentially immortal. Sodium bicarbonate does not degrade, it does not spoil. Stored in a dry cupboard, it remains chemically identical whether you open it tomorrow or in 30 years. Your grandmother kept 1 box for baking, 1 for cleaning, and probably 1 she had forgotten about entirely behind the camp coffee. In the 1940s, the Ministry of Food recommended bicarbonate as an essential store cupboard item, not just for scones and soda bread, but for softening dried pulses and neutralizing acidic sauces. A box cost 2 pence and lasted until you moved house. The only thing that ruins it is moisture. If it clumps, it still works. If it smells of the onions stored next to it, it still works. Chemists at the University of Leeds confirmed in 2018 that sodium bicarbonate shows no measurable degradation over time when kept sealed and dry. Every kitchen in Britain has a box. Most people have no idea it will outlast them. Number 24. Table salt. Pure sodium chloride is a mineral, not a food in the biological sense, and minerals do not expire. That Saxa drum your mother bought in 1987 is chemically identical to the salt mined in Cheshire 200 years ago. Salt has preserved civilizations. Roman soldiers were partly paid in it. British fishermen packed herring in it for centuries. The only reason modern salt carries a best before date is because of anti-caking agents that may lose effectiveness, causing the salt to clump. The salt itself remains perfect. Your grandmother stored a large drum in the pantry and a smaller pot by the cooker, and neither ever went off. She used it for preserving runner beans in stone crocks, a technique that kept summer vegetables edible through winter months when fresh greens cost a fortune. A 2-pound drum of Saxa cost about 6 pence in 1955 and lasted the better part of a year. Salt does not rot, does not grow mold, and does not lose potency. It simply waits. Number 23. White vinegar. Distilled white vinegar is self-preserving. The acetic acid that gives it bite also prevents any bacterial growth, making it one of the few liquids that genuinely lasts indefinitely. Sarson's malt vinegar sat on every fish and chip shop counter in Britain from the 1920s onward, and the white stuff lived under every kitchen sink. Your grandmother used it for pickling onions, cleaning windows, descaling kettles, and reviving wilted lettuce. A bottle cost pennies, and the only change over time is slight cloudiness, which affects appearance but not function. The Institute of Food Science and Technology confirms vinegar does not spoil when stored sealed at room temperature. Those massive jars of pickled eggs sitting in chip shops for what seemed like geological ages were preserved by nothing more than vinegar and faith. Your grandmother knew that a bottle of white vinegar was the most versatile thing in the house, and she was not wrong. Number 22. Dried pulses. Split peas, lentils, haricot beans, and kidney beans formed the backbone of the wartime and post-war British pantry. A pound bag of dried split peas cost about 4 pence in 1952 and could sit in a cool cupboard for years without deteriorating. Archaeologists have germinated lentils found in Egyptian tombs. British ones do not need to last quite that long, but the point stands. Stored in sealed jars away from moisture, dried pulses remain perfectly safe and nutritious for a decade or more. The texture hardens over time, meaning older pulses take longer to cook, but a pinch of bicarbonate of soda in the water sorts that out. Your grandmother kept mason jars lined up on the shelf, each labeled in pencil, and rotated them through soups, stews, and that thick pea soup that could hold a spoon upright. The Women's Institute recommended keeping at least 3 varieties in the pantry at all times, a practice that saved countless families during the coal strikes of the 1970s, when shops ran short and dinner still needed making. Number 21. Dried herbs. That dusty jar of mixed herbs your mother kept next to the pepper grinder could last for years without going off. Dried thyme, sage, rosemary and parsley do not spoil in the way fresh food does. They lose potency gradually, fading in flavor over months and years, but they never become unsafe to eat. Your grandmother dried her own from the garden, tying bundles of sage and hanging them from the kitchen ceiling beam until they crackled between her fingers. Stored in dark glass jars or old tobacco tins, home-dried herbs kept their flavor far longer than the supermarket versions packed in clear plastic. A jar of Schwartz mixed herbs cost about 9 pence in the early 1960s and sat in the spice rack until the label yellowed. The trick was keeping them away from light and steam. Cooks who stored herbs above the cooker lost half the flavor in months. Those who tucked them in a cool, dark cupboard got years of use from a single jar. Number 20. Honey. Archaeologists found sealed pots of honey in Egyptian tombs that were still edible after 3,000 years. British honey lacks the mystique of pharaonic treasure, but it shares the same chemistry. Honey's low moisture content, acidic pH, and natural hydrogen peroxide production make it hostile to bacteria and mold. Your grandmother kept a jar of local honey from the WI market stall, and it sat in the cupboard turning gradually cloudy and crystallized without ever going bad. Crystallization worried people. They thought it meant the honey had spoiled. It had not. A few minutes in a bowl of warm water restored it to liquid gold. During rationing, honey was one of the few sweeteners available without coupons in some areas, and beekeepers traded jars like currency. A pound jar cost about 1 6 in 1950, and families made it last months, spooning it onto porridge and stirring it into hot lemon drinks when colds struck. The jar was never thrown away until it was scraped absolutely clean. Number 19. Corn flour. That box of Brown and Polson's corn flour wedged between the baking powder and the custard powder is another pantry immortal. Pure cornstarch contains almost no moisture and no fat, giving bacteria and mold nothing to feed on. Sealed and stored dry, it remains usable for years beyond any printed date. Your grandmother used it to thicken gravies, set blancmange, and dust work surfaces when rolling pastry. A box cost about 5 pence and lasted until the cardboard itself started falling apart. Corn flour was the invisible foundation of post-war British cooking. Every white sauce, every custard thickened on the stove, every blanket of gravy poured over a cheap cut relied on a spoonful of this tasteless white powder doing its work quietly. It never made the headlines. It never earned a recipe of its own. But without it, half the dishes on the British table would have been thin, watery, and forgettable. Number 18. Golden syrup. Lyle's golden syrup holds the Guinness World Record for the world's oldest unchanged brand packaging, and the product inside is nearly as enduring. Golden syrup is an invert sugar syrup with a moisture content low enough to resist microbial growth almost indefinitely. That green and gold tin with the dead lion on the label sat in every British pantry from the 1880s onward. Your grandmother used it for treacle tart, flapjacks, and drizzled over porridge on cold mornings. A tin cost about 8 pence in 1955 and remained good for years, the syrup growing darker and thicker, but never unsafe. In 2014, a food historian in Pembrokeshire found a tin of Lyle's in a farmhouse cupboard dated to the early 1970s. The syrup inside was darker than fresh, but tasted normal and showed no signs of spoilage. The high sugar concentration creates an environment where bacteria simply cannot survive. That tin on your shelf is not expiring. It is waiting. First, pattern break. Here is something the supermarkets do not want you thinking about. Every item on this list so far costs pennies. Bicarbonate, salt, vinegar, dried peas, honey, corn flour, golden syrup. Your grandmother's pantry was built on ingredients that cost almost nothing and lasted almost forever. Meanwhile, the average British family now throws away £700 worth of food every year, according to WRAP. We buy fresh produce with good intentions, watch it wilt in the fridge by Wednesday, and bin it by Friday. Your grandmother bought a bag of lentils in 1953 and used the last handful in 1955. She bought a tin of golden syrup and it saw out the decade. Her pantry did not need rotating every week. It needed restocking every season. The economics were brutal in their simplicity. She spent less because she wasted nothing, and she wasted nothing because her pantry was built to last. Modern kitchens are designed around freshness. Her kitchen was designed around endurance, and her system worked better. Number 17. Dried pasta. Pasta arrived late to the mainstream British table, but once it settled in during the 1960s and 1970s, it became a pantry staple that refuses to die. Dried durum wheat pasta contains almost no moisture, making it inhospitable to spoilage organisms. Stored in a sealed container away from damp, dried spaghetti or macaroni will remain perfectly safe and edible for years. The texture may become slightly more brittle, but cooking restores it completely. Your mother kept a packet of Napolina spaghetti in the cupboard for emergencies, and that packet was still there 3 Christmases later, still perfectly fine. A pound of dried pasta cost about 7 pence in 1970 and could feed 4 as a main course with nothing more than butter and cheese. The Italians knew what they were doing when they invented a food that could cross oceans without refrigeration. British housewives adopted it with the same pragmatism they applied to everything else in the pantry. Number 16. Tinned corned beef. Those blue and red tins of Fray Bentos corned beef were engineered to last. Commercially canned meat, processed under pressure at temperatures that destroy every known pathogen, can remain safe for decades if the tin stays sealed and undamaged. The US Army tested canned rations from the Second World War in the 1970s and found them still safe to eat, though the flavor had suffered. Your grandmother kept 2 or 3 tins stacked in the cupboard at all times, insurance against empty shelves and unexpected guests. Corned beef hash, corned beef sandwiches, corned beef fritters. A single tin costing about 1 3 pence could stretch across 2 meals for a family of 4. The key to her rotation system was simple. Buy 2, use 1, replace 1. The tin at the back was always the oldest, and it was always fine. During the 3-day week in 1974, when power cuts darkened kitchens across Britain, those tins fed families without needing a cooker at all. Cold corned beef on bread with a smear of pickle. Nobody loved it. Everybody ate it. Number 15. Stock cubes. An OXO cube sealed in its foil wrapper is a tiny brick of concentrated flavor that laughs at best before dates. The combination of salt, dehydrated meat extract, and fat creates an environment too hostile for microbial life. Stored dry, stock cubes remain usable for years. Your grandmother kept a box of 12 in the cupboard and rationed them carefully. Half a cube for gravy, a whole one dissolved in boiling water for soup. A box cost 1 shilling in the 1950s and lasted months. The cube was the emergency meal. Boiling water, 1 OXO cube, stale bread torn into pieces. That was a meal during hard weeks. It was not a good meal, but it was hot, it was savory, and it kept body and soul together until payday. Number 14. Loose leaf tea. Properly stored tea leaves remain drinkable for years. The dry, low-moisture environment of a sealed caddy preserves the leaves far beyond any date on the packet. Your grandmother's tea caddy, that battered tin with the faded roses, was the most important vessel in the house. She bought loose PG tips or Thai fu by the quarter pound, stored it sealed, and brewed pot after pot that tasted exactly the same whether the tea was a week old or a year old. The ritual of the tea caddy was sacred. Warm the pot. 1 spoon per person and 1 for the pot. The tea never changed because the leaves never degraded. A quarter pound cost about 10 pence and lasted a fortnight. The caddy itself lasted a lifetime. Number 13. Powdered custard. Bird's custard powder is a mix of corn flour, flavoring, and coloring that contains virtually no moisture. Sealed in its tin, it remains usable for years. That yellow powder turned into the river of custard that accompanied every British pudding from Spotted Dick to apple crumble. A tin cost 9 pence in 1955 and lasted months of Sunday dinners. Your grandmother measured it with the confidence of a chemist, 3 tablespoons to a pint of milk, never 2, never 4. The tin sat next to the golden syrup and the cocoa, the holy trinity of the British pudding cupboard, all 3 essentially immortal, all 3 costing pennies, all 3 producing desserts that children remember 50 years later. Number 12. Treacle. Black treacle in its dark tin is another sugar-based product that resists spoilage with stubborn chemical efficiency. The molasses content gives it a deep, bittersweet flavor that your grandmother stirred into parkin, gingerbread, and bonfire toffee every November. Like golden syrup, its low water activity prevents microbial growth, and a sealed tin will outlast the calendar by years. A tin cost about 8 pence and sat in the cupboard from one bonfire night to the next, growing slightly thicker but never going off. That intense, almost smoky sweetness was the taste of autumn in northern England, inseparable from fireworks and wool scarves. Second pattern break. Notice the pattern forming here. Your grandmother's pantry was not organized by cuisine or recipe. It was organized by durability. The things that lasted longest sat at the back. The things used daily sat at the front. And the whole system ran on a principle that modern food retail has deliberately destroyed: permanence. Supermarkets need you to come back every week. Their entire business model depends on perishability. Fresh milk that sours in 4 days, bread that stales by Thursday, salad that wilts overnight. Your grandmother's pantry was the opposite. It was a fortress built against the weekly shop. Every jar, every tin, every sealed packet was a small act of independence from the high street. She did not need Tesco every Tuesday. She needed Tesco every month, if that. Number 11. Dried rice. White rice stored in a sealed container in a cool, dry place will last for decades. Brown rice contains oils that can go rancid, but white rice, stripped of its bran layer, is essentially inert. Your grandmother kept a bag of pudding rice for rice pudding and a bag of long grain for savory dishes, and both sat in the cupboard until needed. A £2 bag cost about 9 pence in 1958 and could produce 4 or 5 family puddings. The rice never went off, it simply waited its turn. Number 10. Powdered milk. Marvel dried milk powder was the pantry's answer to the milkman's day off. Sealed and stored cool, powdered milk remains usable for years beyond its printed date. Your grandmother kept a tin for emergencies, for baking when fresh milk ran out, and for those mornings when the milk on the doorstep had frozen solid or turned in the summer heat. A tin cost about 1 6 and lasted weeks. Mixed with water, it was never as good as fresh, and children could always tell the difference. But in cakes, sauces and custard, it performed identically. The tin sat between the cocoa and the birds, another soldier in the pantry's permanent garrison. Number 9. Whole spices. Ground spices lose their punch within months, but whole spices, peppercorns, cloves, cinnamon sticks, nutmeg, last for years. The volatile oils remain locked inside the intact seed or bark until you grind or grate them. Your grandmother kept a nutmeg in a tiny tin grater and used the same nut for months, grating a dusting over rice pudding and custard with a motion so practiced it took barely a second. Whole cloves studded her baked ham at Christmas, the same jar of cloves she had bought the previous year. A small bag of whole peppercorns from the grocer cost about 6 pence and lasted until the pepper mill wore out before the peppercorns did. Number 8. Tinned golden syrup puddings. Those individual pudding tins from Heinz and later supermarket brands are sealed environments where no air reaches the contents. A tin of treacle sponge pudding sitting in the back of the cupboard for 3 years is as safe and edible as the day it was packed. Your grandmother kept 2 or 3 for emergencies, the dinner party that caught her off guard, the Sunday when nothing else was in the house. 5 minutes in a pan of simmering water and you had pudding. The tin was its own storage vessel, cooking vessel, and serving suggestion all in one. Absolute genius engineering disguised as a humble dessert. Number 7. Hardtac biscuits. Ship's biscuit, also called hardtack, is flour and water baked until every trace of moisture has been driven out. British naval stores carried hardtack that remained edible for years aboard ships crossing every ocean. During both World Wars, soldiers carried it in their kits. It was not pleasant. Eating it required soaking in tea or soup to avoid cracking a tooth. But it survived conditions that destroyed every other food. A batch baked at home and stored in a sealed tin would outlast the tin itself. Your great-grandmother likely made something similar during both wars. Flat, dense, indestructible biscuits that served as emergency rations when nothing else was available. Number 6. Jam. Properly made jam, with a high sugar content and a good seal, is self-preserving. The sugar concentration creates an osmotic environment that dehydrates any bacteria foolish enough to land on it. Your grandmother's homemade strawberry jam, sealed with a wax disc and a cellophane cover, would last in the cupboard for 2 years or more without refrigeration. A batch made from garden fruit cost almost nothing, just the price of sugar, and filled the shelves with jewel-colored jars that saw the family through winter mornings of toast and tea. The WI judging tables were lined with jars competing for clarity, set, and flavor, and the winning jams were often older batches that had mellowed into something richer than the fresh ones. Shop-bought jam with its reduced sugar and modern recipes does not last as well, but the old-fashioned kind, made with equal weights of fruit and sugar, is a preservation masterpiece. Number 5. Tinned fruit. Del Monte peach halves, Libby's pineapple rings, and own-brand fruit cocktail in heavy syrup were the dessert insurance of every British pantry. Sealed in their tins, these fruits remain safe for years. The syrup preserves color and texture, while the hermetic seal prevents any contamination. Your grandmother kept a rotating stock on the bottom shelf, ready for trifle, for topping on ice cream, or for serving as pudding with a dollop of evaporated milk when nothing else presented itself. A tin cost about 9 pence and could sit quietly for 3 or 4 years without anyone worrying. The fruit cocktail with its single mysterious cherry was the taste of childhood birthday parties, scooped from the tin into glass bowls and served with pride. Number 4. Cocoa powder. Cadbury's Bourneville Cocoa in its dark red tin is another low-moisture powder that resists spoilage with quiet chemical stubbornness. Stored, sealed and dry, cocoa powder remains usable for years. Your grandmother made hot cocoa on winter evenings, stirred it into chocolate sponge batter and dusted it over the top of trifle. A tin cost about 1 shilling and lasted through multiple baking seasons. The flavor deepened slightly with age, but never turned unpleasant. That tin sitting behind the sugar bowl was part of the permanent furniture of the British kitchen. Third pattern break. Consider this. Your grandmother could have survived a month without leaving the house, feeding a family of 4 on nothing but what sat in her pantry. Salt, flour, dried pulses, rice, tinned meat, golden syrup, jam, tea, powdered milk, stock cubes. Every single one of those items lasts for years. She did not call it prepping. She did not watch videos about survival food. She simply remembered what her mother taught her during the war. That a well-stocked pantry is not paranoia, it is common sense. And every item in it was chosen not for its Instagram appeal, but for its ability to keep people alive when the world outside the kitchen door became unreliable. Number 3. Tinned baked beans. Heinz baked beans in tomato sauce, sealed in their iconic turquoise tin, will remain safe and edible for years beyond the printed date. The acid in the tomato sauce, combined with the hermetic seal, creates a preserved environment that simply does not allow spoilage. Your grandmother stacked tins like bricks along the back of the cupboard, a wall of cheap protein ready for beans on toast, beans with chips, or beans stirred into a casserole to stretch the meat. A tin cost about 7 pence in the 1960s, and 4 tins could feed a family for a week of lunches. The bean tin was the ultimate British emergency food, so universal that during the Y2K panic in 1999, supermarkets reported a run on Heinz beans that emptied shelves across the country. People who had never thought about pantry storage suddenly became their grandmothers overnight. Number 2. White sugar. Granulated white sugar stored in a sealed container does not spoil. It cannot support microbial growth because its osmotic pressure destroys any bacteria on contact. A bag of Tate & Lyle granulated, bought in 1960, would be chemically identical to a bag bought today. Your grandmother kept a large bag in a ceramic jar with a tight lid and used it for everything: tea, baking, preserving, and sweetening stewed fruit. Sugar was rationed until 1953, the last food to come off the ration book, and the memory of scarcity made every household treat it with respect. A 2-pound bag cost about 6 pence and lasted according to how many cups of tea the household drank. The jar was never allowed to empty completely. There was always sugar in the house. Always. Number 1. Tinned meat and fish. Corned beef, spam, tinned sardines, tinned pilchards, tinned salmon. These were the crown jewels of the British pantry, the foods that outlasted everything and sustained everyone. A tin of John West salmon bought in the 1950s could theoretically remain safe for decades if the seal held. The US National Food Processors Association tested canned goods from a steamboat that sank in 1865 and found the contents still bacteriologically safe over a century later. Your grandmother did not know the science, she knew the practice. Tins lasted. Tins did not need electricity. Tins did not care about strikes, power cuts, or snow. That stack of tinned pilchards on the bottom shelf was her answer to every crisis, large or small. When the lights went out, when the shops closed early, when money was tight and payday was still a week away, she reached for a tin, opened it with that old butterfly key, and put food on the table. No fuss, no waste, no failure. The tin was a promise that could not be broken. If your grandmother could see your kitchen right now, she would not understand the fridge full of food with 3 days left to live. She would not understand throwing away a bag of salad because it went slimy on Tuesday. She would open your cupboards and wonder where your supplies went, because her cupboard was not a collection of ingredients, it was a guarantee. Try rebuilding it. Start with salt, bicarbonate, a bag of lentils, and a tin of beans. You will be surprised how much safer your kitchen feels when the back of the cupboard can feed you for a month. Tell me in the comments which of these your grandmother kept, and which ones are still sitting in your cupboard right now, older than your children and twice as reliable.